I uncovered 3 terrifying true nightmares that will haunt your sleep forever. I always thought I was safe in my own home. You know, a cozy little space filled with my stuff, surrounded by familiar sounds. But that night, when I heard that creak in the floorboards, I should have known better. I never should have opened that door. It all started as a regular evening. I tossed on my favorite old jacket and brewed a cup of tea, the steam spiraling in the chilly air like ghostly whispers. The shadows in my living room flickered, dancing against the walls. I sat down, settling into the couch, ready to binge my favorite series. The soft glow of the screen felt comforting, until it didn't. A sudden knock echoed through the silence. Cold dread washed over me. It was too late for visitors. A quick glance at the clock confirmed it. I shouldn't have been expecting anyone. I brushed it off, thinking it was just the wind. But then, another knock, louder this time. My heart raced. Something wasn't right. I got up, each step feeling heavier. The air thickened around me, smelled of dust and unease. I could feel my pulse quickening, like a drumbeat in my ears. Shadows passed by the corners of my vision, but when I turned, nothing was there. Just the creeping cold touching my skin like fingers. Cautiously, I approached the door, my hand trembling on the knob. With every moment, the wrongness of the situation pressed in on me. I dared to peer through the peephole, but only darkness stared back. Then came a scraping sound from the far end of the hallway. It didn't belong. My stomach twisted. "Hello," I called, the quiver betraying my voice. Silence followed. Then the scraping again, closer. The shadows felt alive, moving, closing in around me. I stepped back, ready to slam the door shut, but instead, I turned the knob and opened it. The sight that met me was chilling. The hallway stretched beyond, an abyss of darkness where there shouldn't have been one. I inhaled sharply. The temperature dropped, my breath visible in front of me. Whispers circled, incomprehensible and urgent, making the hair on my arms stand on end. Felt like something was watching me, lurking just out of sight. I stumbled backward, heart pounding like thunder. Just as I reached to close the door, the scraping erupted into a deafening roar. A storm of chaos and then silence. Then I saw it. A figure emerged from the shadows, its face obscured but eyes glimmering like cold steel. Couldn't breathe. Panic coursed through me, and I wanted to scream. But my voice was swallowed by fear, a wave of dread crashing down. Before I could react, the door slammed shut on its own. The darkness closed in around me, and all I could hear was my own ragged breath. I had unleashed something, and I was left to confront the unknown. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon, and while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. Heart hammering, I pressed my back against the door, trying to catch my breath as the shadows thickened, coiling around me like smoke. A pulsing darkness enveloped the living room. Every object I once held dear now twisted and ominous, casting distorted shapes across the walls. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing myself to wake from this nightmare. But all I could hear was an echoing whisper, a voice calling my name in tones both familiar and foreign. "Come closer." The words drifted through the air, sweet yet sinister. I swallowed hard, my throat dry, heart racing. I opened my eyes, searching for the source, but the room was empty. The television flickered, the screen ebbing in and out of focus as if it too wrestled with the uninvited presence weaving through my home. Gathering my courage, I approached the couch, the heart of my fears, and picked up the remote. I tried to turn the TV off, but the buttons were unresponsive. The screen burst to life, displaying static, raucous, and distorted. Images flickered within the noise, faces I recognized, twisted in agony, frozen in a moment of despair. My friends, family, all of them pale silhouettes trapped in a perpetual scream. Crackling static danced through the air and I could almost hear it breathing, urging me to stay, to join the tortured faces on the screen. I wanted to scream back, to snap the remote in fury, but I stood frozen, paralyzed by the churning dread that threatened to pull me in. Suddenly, the whisper returned, this time sharper, more insistent. You must let them in. The lights flickered ominously, plunging the room into shadow once more. I felt the air grow heavy, the nails of panic slicing through me like knives. I turned towards the door, a dark void looming before me, and our shared silence cracked like ice. As those whispers tickled the edges of my sanity, I felt a pulse beneath my skin, as if the house itself were alive, beckoning me closer to the dark realm lying just beyond that door. With each thud of my heart, something within urged me to move. I turned back to the door, the lingering shadow still pushing against the wood. The whispers escalated, a cacophony of cries urging me to act. I hesitated at first, my fingers hovering over the knob, but the darkness enveloped me, lifting my hand, forcing me forward as I pulled the door open. A gust of freezing air rushed in, wrapping around me like a shroud. The hallway beyond twisted and turned, stretching into infinity. I could hear it now, the low, dreadful thrum that seemed to pulse with a heartbeat, drawing me in. Shadows flickered at the edges, emerging from the corners of my vision, grotesque shapes mimicking the stature of human forms, writhing with unnatural grace. Join us, could they be beckoning me or warning me? The question slashed through my mind as I took a hesitant step into the darkness. I didn't choose to go. It felt as if the shadows clamored for me, pulling me toward the inky depths. But what awaited me at the end of this passage? A sudden rush surged through me, compulsion and terror intermingling. An instinctual need to flee, yet my feet remained immobilized. I felt a cold hand graze my shoulder from behind, icy fingers dancing across my skin, sending a jolt of fear through my spine, causing every instinct to scream that I had to turn around. I spun, heart lodged in my throat, but found nothing. Just shadows layered thick against the walls, mocking my fear. My breath quickened further, and as I turned back to the hallway, the whispers became a chilling chant. Let them in, let them stay. As I teetered at the edge, caught between trusting my instincts or succumbing to the relentless pull of the unknown. Another wave of freezing air thrust through the doorway, enveloping me in a chilling embrace. And then I felt something press against my back, pushing me forward, deeper into the darkness. In that moment, the dreadful reality crashed over me like a tidal wave. This presence, this entity wanted me. It wanted to consume me, to take my place among the faces trapped in the flickering screen and beyond. Suddenly, I heard a piercing scream, a voice I recognized all too well piercing through the chorus of whispers, and it shattered any veil of calm I had held. Help me! The cry reverberated through my bones. I turned, faced the door, ready to run back into the safe space of my home. But the instant my foot moved, the ground beneath me shifted, engulfing me with shadows. The hallway twisted into an intricate maze, every direction leading further into its suffocating embrace. And in that chaos, I realized with a heart-stopping clarity that whatever awaited in that darkness was already inside me, clawing for release. With nowhere to escape, all I could do was scream as that cold, dark figure surged forth, and I fell into the waiting void. Chapter. I uncovered 3 terrifying true nightmares that will haunt your sleep forever. Falling. My body plummeted through the void, a disorienting whirl of blackness that seemed to stretch for eternity. The grounding sensation of the earth beneath me vanished, replaced by an ethereal disarray, as fears I dared not confront flickered like shadows at the edge of my consciousness. As I fell, bizarre memories spiraled through my mind, moments that felt too abstract yet too intimate. The laughter of friends gathered around a campfire, the warmth of sunlight filtering through leaves, the haunting tune of a lullaby sung long ago by a mother who had succumbed to the ravages of time. And yet, mixed within were bitter whispers and gnashing teeth. Time lost meaning. It felt as if I fell through a rift in reality, my spirit weighing down heavily while my body disbanded into bits of fear. Suddenly, I crashed onto something that felt not like solid ground but a grim amalgamation of despair and texture, something pulsing, alive. Shakily, I pushed myself upright. I was no longer in the hallway but inside a dark cavern, the air thick with a miasma that constricted my throat. The space around me flickered dimly, illuminated by an eerie phosphorescence that revealed grotesque faces carved into the stone walls, twisted in unending anguish. Where was I? Panic surged anew as I realized the whispers had become screams, unbearably loud and shattering. It was as if the very essence of the darkness had gathered itself to howl in agony, and I felt the blood drain from my face, surrendering entirely to terror. "Welcome home," a voice licked through the air, echoing off the jagged walls. It was unmistakable, familiar yet alien, my own voice spoken with chilling detachment. I stumbled backward, my heart racing like a wild thing. How could my voice betray me so? The shadows swirled, and each subtle movement revealed more wretched forms merging from the depths, their faces framing unspeakable horror, mouths agape in silent screams. "Join us," they murmured in unison, their breaths chilling me to the core. Each shadow wove fascinating but horrid images of those I loved, their eyes wide with fear, visible agony painting their expressions. My heart clenched as I recognized every figure. My younger brother, my childhood friend, even the neighbor whose words had once brought comfort in the darkest of hours. They reached out, bony fingers stretching toward me, a grotesque assembly of once familiar faces twisted in suffering. "Please," they whispered, echoes of desperation that clawed at the barrier of reality. "We are lost. We need you." Then, my mind drifted to the flickering screen, where I had seen them trapped. That television, that devilish portal. I had wronged them by not acting. And now here they were, caught endlessly within this pit of torment, begging for their savior in the most twisted fashion imaginable. With a surge of primal instinct, I turned and fled deeper into the cavern, heart pounding, breath stolen away. I couldn't let them claim me. I had to escape. Vicious shadows reached for me, clawing desperately at my skin, leaving trails of icy dread. An exit loomed in the distance, a faint glimmer of hope cutting through the claustrophobic darkness. My feet flew over the uneven ground, and I pressed on, but the darkness pooled around me, thickening, pulling me back as if the very stone wished to entrap me in a cradle of despair. Just as I reached the glowing arc, a familiar scream shattered my resolve, slicing through the darkness once more. "Help me!" It was a voice I knew all too well, the voice of my brother, calling for me from some unseen vortex. It echoed louder, creating fissures in my sanity, drawing me back toward the shadowy morass from which I had escaped. That I faltered, torn between the painful urgency to save him and the instinctual dread racing through my veins. The voices merged, slithering into my mind as parts of a horrifying symphony, drowning out any rational thought. "You must choose," and in that instant the very fabric of the reality around me rippled. A heartbeat, palpable and laden with dread. I could feel the entity close, its presence spiraling into the depths of my essence, whispering venomous promises of power and unity, of letting go. A cold torrent swept through me, dragging my thoughts down into a chasm of despair. "You can save him," it breathed at the edges of my consciousness. "You simply must let go." Frozen beneath the weight of the decision before me, I felt it, the clawing fingers of darker things wrapping around my mind, urging me to yield. Would I lose my own soul in the process of saving another? The ground trembled violently, and reality began to fracture as shadows converged. I could see it, a dark presence forming within the maw of the void, a mass of teeth and eyes twisting into a shape that beckoned. With one last scream echoing in my ears, I felt my body pull apart at the seams, fracturing like the corridor that led me here. Torn between love and despair, I allowed the darkness to entwine itself around my heart, and as the world dissolved, I was left with only one thought. What if I let the darkness win? And as I descended into that echoing abyss, I realized I was not the only one falling. Something sinister, old, and powerful spiraled around me, weaving its existence into mine, thrumming with the heartbeat of doom. Suddenly I understood. There would be no escape, and a shadowed revelation flared before my eyes as the abyss welcomed me. I was never alone. Something far more ancient had awaited my arrival, hungry for my essence, and a final blink of clarity. Breath hitching in my throat as I felt the net of shadows tightening, my scream met the void, and the silence that followed was deafening. Then everything went dark. When I regained awareness, it was as if I were surfacing from the depths of a stormy sea. My chest heaved, lungs filled with air that felt thick and acrid, tasting of iron and despair. The darkness still clung to me, but it was different now, subtle and watchful, survivoress largesse amidst the lingering spectral grip. I lay hunched on the rough stone floor of the cavern, my heart a predator thrumming against my ribs. A whisper danced around me, a soft, insidious breath of sound that felt alive. You linger still. The voice, a slithering caress that sent shivers raking down my spine, lapped at my consciousness. You chose poorly, yet still you are here. Rising shakily to my feet, I surveyed my surroundings. The phosphorescent glow pulsed in waves now, illuminating grotesque murals that wrapped around the cavern walls. These twisted paintings depicted scenes both horrifying and alluring. Figures caught in ecstatic torment, their faces stretched wide in grim ecstasy, realms of nightmare blooming beside the familiar. It seemed as if they were laughing silently at my plight that I stumbled deeper into this surreal space, utterly disoriented but propelled by an innate need to escape. The whispers slithered into my ears, sticky tendrils plaited with memory, torment, and dread. They became louder as I walked, the air thick with longing. You don't belong to them. You don't belong here, they hissed, like serpents coiling into fragrant petals. Was it the lingering despair of those I had lost that made me feel so tethered? I shook my head, struggling to keep my bearings while the shadows pressed in, a constant reminder of my entrapment. They're waiting, that voice taunted, slinking around my thoughts, echoing with every pulse of the lights. Then, surrounded by confusion, I caught a glimpse of a figure. It hovered at the edge of the phosphorescent glow, a stark silhouette flickering at the periphery of my vision. My pulse quickened, and with faltering steps, I drew closer, straining to discern its features. Help, the syllable dripped with agony, a gossamer thread of hope that shattered against the weight of dread. As I drew nearer, the entity resolved before my eyes an echo of my brother. His face marred by shadows, eyes wide with terror yet sparkling with a light I recognized. You must find me. He stretched his hand towards me, trembling, glimmering faintly against the dark. You're my only chance. But turmoil roiled within me. I wavered on the precipice of giving in. I can help you. Lastly, my desperation rose up, curling around my heart. I refused before. If I can just know. He screamed the word, a raw explosion that reverberated against the cavern walls. You can't help me if you drown. Before I could process the meaning behind his warning, the shadows began to swirl and lash toward him. They were alive. They writhed and twisted like living serpents, a mass of hungry darkness ready to devour one of its own. In that instant, something deep within me stirred a need to protect, to fight against the encroaching doom. Stop it. Leave him alone, I shouted, the force of my voice slicing through the air, igniting the flickering phosphorescence into seething radiance. The monstrosity hesitated, the shadows containing my brother recoiling slightly as if stung. Giving in to an instinctive fury, I charged forward, the tumult surging through me, a blazing determination propelling me to reach him. Come with me, I beckoned, hands outstretched, willing him to break free. The shadows writhed back like an offended creature, a warping mass clenching around him tighter with each moment. But then I noticed the truth, the way his face reflected horror, agony melding with something darker. It wasn't fear that animated him. No, I screamed, the recognition striking me like frost. You want to stay? And in the fray of ethereal chaos, time warped. I witnessed him contorting, no longer my innocent brother, but something far more sinister emerging from the depths, a creation that reflected twisted echoes of me, blending desire for freedom with the caress of the abyss. Join me, he beckoned, a ravenous grin stretching across his features, ghostly gleams flickering in those once kind eyes. We could be one. The shadows thickened, pulling at my limbs, constricting the very air around me. I felt their cold breath on my skin, the weight of their malevolence wrapping around my throat, choking my resolve. Don't you dare! The urge to fight surged, yet despair wove itself around me like an iron chain. Just as despair threatened to devour me, the cavern began to quake violently. The ground split, fissures slicing through the stone, illuminated by a ghastly light as the void began to expand. Your choice, the ancient voice echoed, intensely hungry now, feeding off my turmoil. Then, as the floor beneath me trembled, tearing away, laughter erupted in the air, haunting, maniacal, insatiable. It spiraled around me, a haunting choir urging me to surrender, to submit to the darkness that reached out like a lover's desperate embrace. No, not like this, I screamed as I teetered on the brink of the consuming maw, feeling the horrific tension rise. An unspeakable horror knotted tight within me as I glanced at my brother, my flesh caught betwixt love and monstrosity. A dark rift gaped open wider behind him, threatening to devour us both, and somewhere inside, deep and profound, I realized. In my desperate struggle, I had awakened something that had long lain dormant, and it was hungry for our suffering. The dark laughter crescendoed around us, and the cavern erupted into chaos, a roiling tempest of shadows, flesh, and fear as I bore witness to the obliteration of everything I knew. And in one final moment of sheer horror collided with revelation, I was being pulled forward, pulled toward the very heart of the darkness. And I couldn't tell if avoiding it was even possible anymore. All light flickered and faded, and as I fell into the rapacious jaws of the unknown, I understood that this nightmare was only just beginning. As I descended into the churning abyss, where earthly sounds were swallowed by the ravenous void, time felt elastic, the seconds stretching like brittle threads, fraying at the ends. The shadows coiled around me, a gelatinous mass determined to suffocate my struggle for air. I screamed, my voice no longer mine, but a distant echo lost in the cacophony of despair that enveloped me. Falling deeper, I fought against the oppressive dark, but it tugged at my limbs, urging me to surrender. Flashes of memories swam before my eyes, blurred snapshots of laughter and joy interspersed with violent, raw terror. I saw my brother once more, his monstrous visage twisted in an impossible smile, a macabre reflection of who he once was. Join me, he implored, the promise of connection painted in his tone, an alluring seduction mixed with agony that threatened to swamp my resolve. Suddenly, the ground solidified beneath me, the darkness retreating just enough for me to rise to my feet. I stumbled, gasping, heart pounding as I regained a foothold in this unholy realm. Shadows flitted at the edges of my vision, cold whispers clawing at my sanity. The air was thick with a stench of decay and withering desperation. Desperate thoughts spiraled through my mind. Was my brother truly gone? What horrors lurked behind that bewitching grin? As I surveyed the cavern, my breath caught in my throat. The walls seemed to pulse with dormant life, grotesque images writhing violently as if begging to break free. I knew this place hadn't merely been a prison. It was a manifestation of horrors amassed over time, trapped within its very stone. It had become a mirror, reflecting my deepest fears, desires, and regrets. With cautious steps, I ventured further into the disarray, compelled to piece together the fragments of my shattered reality. Each footfall released echoes that blurred the line between memory and madness. I began hearing a new whisper, a symphony of voices weaving together a tale of sorrow. They spoke of lost souls, attempting to warn no, to beg me of the greater terror that lurked beyond, deeper in the cavern's embrace. They are watching. The voices tremored like leaves quaking in a gale. They know what you hide. They want what you fear most. Panic surged as I pressed forward, compelled to uncover the truth behind their warnings. I clawed at the walls, the stone rough against my fingertips, tasting the desperation that spilled from my very soul. My heart sank as the realization dawned upon me. Whatever haunted this cavern had its sights set firmly upon my past. When a cold flicker of light danced in the distance, cutting through the shadows like a fragile beacon. I felt myself drawn closer, each step resonating with both dread and a glimmer of hope. As I reached a threshold, The light exploded into blinding brilliance, illuminating a grotesque tableau of tormented figures, the faces contorted and warped in an unending cycle of anguish. Among them, I found fleeting glimpses of familiar faces. Friends I had abandoned, loved ones I couldn't save. Their eyes turned to me, pleading voices merging into a mournful choir echoing through the space. "Why did you leave us?" they cried, the words striking with the force of betrayal. "You promised." Despair wove itself tighter, a noose of guilt choking every breath I took. Words tumbled from my lips unbidden. I never wanted to, but the air turned brittle, resonating with laughter, mocking and cruel. "Words cannot save you now." A voice rippled through the air, harsh and electric, a sickening froth overlaid with the fraying edges of sanity. I turned, dread coiling like a viper in my gut, as I beheld a grotesque manifestation of ruin and amalgamation of all those I had lost. They were twisted creatures, their limbs stretching out towards me, pulling closer, while their mouths moved in a haunting symphony of regret. "The void hungers," they sang, forever bound to this melancholic existence, lamenting what had been lost. "You tasted our pain, now you are one with the hunger." Just as their wails crescendoed, the cavern itself began to spasm, the walls vibrating violently, and the light flickered ominously above. In an instant, a fissure erupted beneath me, threatening to swallow everything whole, the very ground trembling like it understood. It knew that I was the catalyst for this nightmare. With my heart racing, I leaped back from the yawning chasm. But the shadows surged forward, crashing against me, a wall of flesh and darkness determined to drag me down. "Flee while you can," a ghostly whisper urged me, rising above the cacophony. "Find the heart. Only there can you bind the darkness." In that moment of chaos, I glimpsed the twisted faces of my past rising, but were suddenly thrust back into the shadows, their cries morphing into a singular, piercing laugh that shook the very fabric of reality around me. I turned to escape, fueled by a desperate yearning for survival, but the cavern was shifting, and the path I had taken was evaporating into nothingness. As I sprinted along the trembling floor, reality began to warp, the undulating stone shifting underfoot like a living entity eager to collapse. With my heart pounding in my chest, I felt a presence at my back, something monstrous lurking just beyond the veil of light, drawn by the scent of my despair. I could hear it breathing, a low, guttural sound that promised untold horrors to come. Then, as I neared the edge of the chasm, I felt the unmistakable tug of something cold wrapping around my ankle, pulling me backward. The shadows were marking me as their own, craving my fear. With one last agonized glance at the teeming darkness behind me, I braced for what would break from the depths, and just as I felt myself slipping, I could have sworn I heard a familiar voice chime above the chaos, one I'd long thought lost. But nothing prepared me for the icy realization that followed. The Mimic's grasp has begun. You are never alone. I screamed as the world dove into darkness once more, a haunting echo of voices trailing off, leaving only a dreadful silence, and I truly understood. The true horror would begin only when I understood its true intent. The darkness receded for a breath, an unnatural pause that felt heavy with anticipation. My foot stumbled forward, shallow breaths rattling like marionette strings, claws clutched at my throat, threatening to cut off the remains of my voice. This realm was alive, pulsating with an unseen heartbeat that synchronized with the dread festering in my chest. I gathered myself, swiping trembling hands through my hair, clinging to reality with each stark touch. With ghastly persistence, the phantom voices returned, whispering sweetly deceptive truths of secrets buried deep within the haunted corridors of my mind. They live, they sighed. They linger forevermore. As I stumbled further into the onslaught of memories, shapes began to coalesce in the unyielding darkness. They flickered around me like fireflies drifting toward a flame, too captivated by the light to consider the consequences of their approach. And then I saw it. The familiar outline of a door, the periphery marked by an ancient stone archway that pulsated with an agonizing memory. My heart thundered at the sight. This door heralded the moment I had tried to forget, the night my brother vanished, engulfed by shadows born of his own despair. A candle's flicker danced by summoning a claustrophobic warmth that felt more like a snare than a blessing. The whispers grew louder, frantic. Go back. Time is a cruel joke. Do not open. The warning slipped through my thoughts like water through fingers. Too late as I felt the compelling pull to reach for the door handle, a rusted relic of betrayal. It turned with a reluctant groan, unveiling a small room steeped in decay. The air was dank and stale, thick like the breath of a grave, and it clawed at my throat, urging me to retreat. Yet I stepped inside, though dread coiled viciously within my gut, pulling deep at my insides. The walls were lined with portraits. Each face was a mosaic of anguish and sorrow, their painted eyes bleeding tears that spiraled into puddles at their feet. The canvas seemed to beg for release, mouthing silent screams as if to warn me that true horrors were hidden just beyond this facade of shadow and silence. In the center of the room, an altar of polished obsidian jutted from the floor. Ancient symbols etched on its surface pulsed in the darkness. I approached, inexplicably drawn to the dark elegance. But upon nearness, an unbearable chill gripped my spine, forcing me to stagger backward. Welcome back. A voice croaked from the shadows, honeyed but laced with poison. It sliced through the air like a razor's edge. I turned toward the sound, and there he stood, my brother, the same glint of mischief reflecting in his hollowed eyes, now inundated with unholy knowledge. You thought you could escape the void? No, dear sibling. It waits patiently for those marked by its grasp. The flickering light revealed him further, and I recoiled at the sight of his elongated limbs, grotesque and bent in unnatural angles. The features that once cradled laughter were now an echo of torment, twisted into an anguished visage. They are all here, he continued, voice low, almost jubilant. The lost, the forsaken. Together we shall reclaim what is ours. A ringing chime echoed through the darkness, a sound pulsing through me like the beating of a drum steeped in malice. The portraits began to writhe, the figures within them emerging slowly, shaking, drawn by the call of something I could barely grasp. They began to step from within the frames, elongated shadows morphing into half-formed dreams of torment. Echoing the pain they had suffered throughout eternity, I staggered back instinctively, but the cold grasp of a shadow reached out and wrapped around my wrist, forcing me to watch as those once familiar faces twisted with rage and sorrow, trying to drag me into their midst. You left us, echoed every cry, resonating painfully against the walls of my mind. Make it right. Share the burden. We cannot be whole without you. No, this can't be real. I screamed, desperate for denial as I fought against the suffocating pull of those long-lost souls. Yet their claims unraveled the fabric of my fortitude, spiraling into the chasm of guilt I had buried under layers of forgetfulness. We're family, my brother hissed, his voice a sinister embrace. His smile widened, revealing a mouth dripping with dread. All you have to do is release the burden. Relinquish your memories. Come, join us. The shadows convulsed around me, each figure reaching out with ghostly fingers, their hushed demands rising like a tsunami, threatening to engulf my very essence. I felt my knees buckle, warmth pooling beneath my skin, as the weight of hopelessness threatened to crush me. But in that swirling chaos, something within me ignited. No, I screamed, fueled by a surge of defiance. You won, take me. I ripped my hand free from their grasp, stumbling back toward the door, my heart a drum crying out against the tide of despair surging from every corner of the room. But as I turned to flee, my pulse quickened as the door slammed shut, locking tightly flesh against stone, sealing me within this endless nightmare. And then I heard it, a laughter so chilling it petrified my blood. It rose from the floor, vibrant and merciless, a chord of 1,000 forgotten souls, harmonizing into a mournful symphony of insanity. And those final moments, before darkness reclaimed its throne, I caught a glimmer of hope, a faint glint catching the wild glow of sinister light. Atop the obsidian altar lay a shard of silver, untouched and gleaming amidst bone and ruin. And in that fragment, I saw the dark reflection of my own haunted eyes. Only one will survive the hour, a breathless, sibilant voice whispered, reverberating against the walls. Make your choice or face the unending void. The shadows shrieked, closing the distance with ravenous intent as icy fingers entangled around me once more. Each heartbeat pulsed louder, drowning out everything else, and I understood with excruciating clarity the price of my defiance. As the world shrunk beneath the weight of despair, time fractured in my veins, leaving me at the precipice of destiny. And just when I thought I could fade into oblivion, one haunting thought entrusted me with choice. In this twilight of despair, who would I become if the darkness would not relent? With a jolt, I snapped awake, or so I thought. The room pulsed with a fog of uncertainty as my eyes opened to flickering lights surrounding me, overshadowed by the oppressive weight of despair that lingered from fractured dreams. The chamber was the same, yet changed. A syncopated thrum invaded the air around me, almost a heartbeat thrumming from the obsidian altar, echoing through the deep crevices of my mind. Panic surged within as I scanned my surroundings. My brother's grotesque figure lingered at the edge of my view, but he no longer stood alone. A horde of specters hovered in the shadows, their eyes hollow voids where hope once sparkled. They stepped closer, pouring from the corners, invading my sanctuary with their cries of anguish. "Time waits for no one," they shrieked, crescendoing into a chaotic anthem of despair. In that moment, I recalled the silver shard from the altar. Its reflection lingered in my mind like a distant star. If I could only reach it. But dread enveloped me. The specters moved, a wave of despair crashing upon me like the tide pooling greedily around my ankles. I could feel their sadness clamoring to the surface of my own guilt, an amalgamation of loss that clutched at my heart with iron fingers, more tangible than my own predicament. "Join us," my brother whispered again, now maddened joy glimmering in his once familiar face. "We are whole when we share our pain. It's more than existence, dear sibling. It's a symphony of darkness." The warmth of his words washed over me, seductive in their promise of connection. I fought against the alluring embrace but found myself wavering against the tide of sorrow enveloping me. "Stop," I cried, hands clenching fists at my sides, shaking from the very core of my being. But no sooner had I protested than icy fingers snaked around my wrist again, dragging me closer to the altar, closer to the inevitability of my brother's embrace. The rich obsidian gleamed with malice, almost eager, luring me like a moth to a flame. Instead of flight, I willed myself forward, trembling fingers probing the surface. I could feel warmth radiate from the mysterious shard, and as I gripped it, a pulse of energy shot through me. A surge of clarity gripped my mind, illuminating murky corners once shrouded in guilt, memories of laughter, family dinners, fleeting happiness stained by my brother's choices. Suddenly, the laughter morphed, echoing the pain of 1,000 lost souls, merging into an orchestra of horror that threatened my sanity. I clutched the silver shard tighter, feeling its warm pulse match my own. What do you want?" I gasped, desperation leaching into my voice. "Become one of us," the specters whispered in a chorus sigh. "Share in our agony. Let go and set us free." My voice stalled, threatened by the encroaching darkness surrounding me. "You're not free. You're trapped. You're only perpetuating this horror." Their eyes ignited with fury. The shadows thickened, their forms distorting as they twitched forward, hungry for my despair. I felt my resolve crumble under the pressure of their collective misery, the cries pulling me into their depths, seducing me with memories of my brother before he was consumed, before this confinement wrapped around him like a ghastly shroud. And in a moment of panic, I raised the shard high above my head, casting erratic light upon their disfigured faces. The skeletal fingers recoiled in unison, flailing as the shimmering brightness forced them back. "Stay away," I screamed, and in that moment of clarity, I felt power surge through me, illuminating the shadows with incandescent glow. But the moment was fleeting. The laughter of my brother echoed back, rich and thick, overpowering as he retorted, "You think the light can save you? Come, sister. We can find joy in our mutual torment. All it takes is one choice." "No," I bellowed, eyes burning with determination. I had to choose. I could feel the tether of grief vibrate within me, threatening to crush my spirit. The chains they wielded were forged from despair, drawing tighter with every passing second. Then came a crack, a split in the fabric of the room trembled, the portraits behind me shattering like glass, unveiling the faces of those lost, those forgotten, those consumed by darkness. You'll drown in their sorrow. The chorus shrieked, a cacophony of truth drowned in anguish. Fueled by a reflex that echoed centuries of generational strength, I plunged the silver shard into the altar, each forceful thrust drawing the shadows inwards, yanking the torment of forgotten lives into the earthen depths. The echoes of my brother morphed into shrieks of rage and pain, resonating through the chaos. The blinding light engulfed us, but then suddenly, the altar collapsed, a gaping maw opening beneath it, pulling everything shadows, screams, memories into the abyss. My heart thundered against futile resistance, but I felt an unexpected warmth emanate from the shard. Light poured from it in tremors, cascading like molten plasma as I hovered on the edge. A thought punctured through the fog, the reflection the destinies entwined. What if I had misunderstood all this time? Just as the world began to fracture into labyrinths of darkness, I was propelled forward toward the chasm, a decision looming on the horizon. I could either leap into the void, consumed by the depths, or succumb to the shadow's mournful dirge. Your choice, the haunting voice surged again, echoing within. And in that heartbeat, I was left dangling at the precipice, massive shadows clawing at my heels as a blinding brilliance engulfed me, and the connection between brothers twisted into a monolith of dread. But I did not want to know the price of my decision as I spiraled into a reality that awaited all my fears. I plunged headfirst into the chasm, the silver shard clutched tight in my grip. Time warped and twisted, a fluid nightmare where echoes of my brother's twisted laughter spiraled out like smoke, choking me with each flash of white light surrounding me. I didn't scream, I couldn't. My voice turned fragile, lost amidst the eternal fall. Around me, shadows swirled as if they too were particles drawn towards an unseen gravity. My heart raced, teetering on the brink of madness, while my mind frantically clawed its way toward understanding. Each second expanded into hours, filled with dread-laden whispers and the sense of decay and despair. I felt the remnants of lost souls entwined within the depths, their ghostly fingers grazing my skin, grazing my very essence, desperate for release. As I fell deeper, the brilliance dimmed, and streaks of darkness curled around me like tendrils, pulling me closer to a surreal landscape. I finally landed with a thud, the impact sending an array of colors spiraling away into the void. I lay sprawled on an expanse of ash-gray soil, shards of bone and whispers of wretched memories littering the ground, an amalgamation of every soul claimed by despair. I gained my footing, but the air was thick with the scent of rot, the aftermath of countless lives entangled in this cursed place. The silhouettes of twisted figures drifted among the shadows, flickering in and out of existence like dimming stars. I staggered forward, heart racing as their pained whispers echoed around me, each voice laced with a desperate plea. "It's not your fault," one whispered, and another added, "You were meant to join us." My instincts urged me to flee, to escape this realm that made the dreams from which I had awoken feel like a children's playground. But deep down, a sickening curiosity prowled within. What secrets lay buried beneath this cursed soil? A sudden chill prickled the nape of my neck as one figure stepped closer, its eyes reflecting an abyss of sorrow. It was female, her form draped in tattered remnants of a once brilliant gown, long since faded into shadow. "You have given voice to our pain," she hissed, her voice a melodic echo, seductive yet laced with poison. "Who are you?" I asked, swallowing hard as panic clawed at my throat. "I am but a whisper of those who suffered as you suffer now," she replied, drawing nearer. "We were forgotten, as will you be, unless you understand the truth of your brother's plight." Her words coiled around me, as if steering me toward a destiny I desperately wished to avoid. "No, my brother is a monster. He chose this," I spat, but the tremor in my voice betrayed the ache that surged through me. "The one you define as monster was once a beacon of light," she countered, unfurling spectral fingers. "His joy was a reflection of yours, but choose not to be ensnared by your own darkness. We are but shadows of our former selves, trapped in this restless limbo. Trapped? My mind raced with words, fragments of clarity forming like shards of glass. Where are we? What is this place? An echo of sorrow. A prison forged from the hearts of the broken. She replied, her face an unreadable mask of tranquility and sorrow. You seek answers, so you shall have them. Against my better judgment, I took a hesitant step toward her, compelled by the raw pain rippling through the air. What do you mean? The ground shuddered as if responding to my curiosity, and images began swirling around us, visions of my brother's life before his despair. Scenes lost to the sands of time, moments stained by regret. I could see laughter, light, and brightness, his eyes twinkling with the promise of joy. And then it shifted, morphing into brutality and anguish, shadows devouring those brief glimmers of happiness. I can show you the choice he made, the figure murmured, her gaze piercing through my feeble defenses as the ground warped into a series of memories, whispers aligning into a narrative infused with desperation. With a shuddering breath, I surrendered myself to the visions, scenes of joy flashing like a strobe light before darkened truths. Encased them like iron chains. Innocence melted into darkness as relentless whispers filled the air, resonating within me, a familial bond twisted beyond recognition. And then, abruptly, the air ruptured with silence. The scenes hung heavily, the world around me stilled, and within that suffocating stillness, a horrendous awareness pulsed, an underlying horror that seeped into my thoughts. I suddenly realized this wasn't merely a tale of sorrow. It was a prophecy, a shadow intertwined with my brother's fate that now clawed at the remnants of my sanity. Dread sluggishly tainted the air as I turned to meet the figure's gaze again. What should I do? I implored, each word imbued with raw urgency. Her expression flickered, a glimmer of something sinister dancing behind her hollow eyes. To save him, you must embrace your darkness. Only then can you release him from his prison or join us in eternal suffering. Before I could fully process her meaning, the ground trembled violently beneath me as the figures surrounding us began to pulse with dark energy. One voice rose above the clamor, a guttural, agonized scream echoing through the shadows. Choose now. And in that moment of chilling clarity, shadows poured forth like an avalanche, consuming the landscape in eternal twilight, and I was faced with an impossible dilemma that frazzled my senses, a choice that had the power to shatter not only my brother's fate, but my own very existence. But it was a realization heavy with dread. Dreams and nightmares had begun to entwine, making me the linchpin in a spiraling descent. A personal nightmare hovered just out of reach, and before I could even grasp what lay ahead, the ground trembled beneath me again, splitting into an unyielding chasm of darkness that surged upward, engulfing the light entirely as I was thrown back into the depths of choice, with shadows clawing for my essence. And in the ghastly silence that followed, as the abyss beckoned me back into its depths, I felt a whisper echo through the darkness, chilling my very soul. There's no escape from what you've awakened. As the echoes of the whisper curled around my consciousness, I felt the ground shift beneath my feet, destabilizing the very essence of my being. I fell once more into a profound darkness that seethed with anticipation, each pulse resonating with an ancient, unspeakable hatred. The weight of despair pressed down on my chest, squeezing out each breath as memories began to swirl in chaotic patterns, a kaleidoscope of horrors that refused to be ordered or understood. Then, out of the claustrophobic blackness, the laughter returned, unmistakably my brother's, piercing the air with an unsettling familiarity. The sound morphed, twisting into something warped and jagged, becoming a grotesque mimicry of joy. I clutched the silver shard, its coolness a stark contrast to the warmth of my pooling anxiety. I inhaled deeply, staving off the rising bile as I steadied my resolve. Where are you? I shouted into the void, hoping against hope that he would answer. The laughter faded, only to be replaced by soft weeping, a wretched melody that echoed from unseen corners. It clawed at me, raw and invasive, each note sharp enough to slice through the tightly knit fabric of my sanity. A cold breeze swirled around me, carrying the scent of charred flesh. I could almost see their faces, that crowded mass of shadows, their mouths agape, crying out in pain as they reached for something just out of their grasp. Something they could almost taste but eternally loathed. Help him! A voice rasped from the darkness, the desperation tangible. Save him from the curse. You cannot allow him to remain trapped. It will consume you both. The plea sang through me, a sharp realization igniting a spark of urgency in my chest. I staggered forward, searching for the source of the voice. The terrain shifted beneath me again, a sudden lurch spiraling me down a narrow path lined with jagged obsidian stones, glimmering with a malevolent light. The shadows whispered and drew back, parting to reveal what lay ahead, a grotesque structure rising from the abyss, adorned with grim imagery that made my heart race with foreboding. Before me stood an archway, twisted and towering, adorned with symbols that flickered in and out like dying stars. My pulse quickened, thrumming in my ears as deep within its realms, shards of trapped souls writhed and reached out with their fingers, begging for release. The walls pulsed softly in rhythm, whispering ancient incantations long forgotten, heavy with curses and pleas. I needed to enter to confront whatever horror lay inside, to save him or perish in the attempt. But as I approached, the air thickened with an oppressive force, an unseen barrier that pushed against me, forcing the shadows of my own fear to surface. I closed my eyes for a moment, grounding myself within my memory of my brother, that fleeting light buried beneath confusion and darkness. Taking a deep breath, I stepped through the archway, the weight of shadows clenching around me like iron shackles. A wave of anguish crashed over me from all sides, unrelenting. Inside, the ground was etched with screaming visages, the silhouettes locked in an eternal dance of torment. Within this terrible domain, fragments of memories coalesced, revealing distorted reflections of my brother's past, his laughter mingling with gasps of despair. Each moment entwined in a noose of dread. As I walked further, the chamber expanded around me, revealing a macabre throne at its center, enshrined in a spectral glow. And upon the throne, draped in shadows, a figure stirred, a reflection of my brother, but twisted, haunted by the very darkness I had sought to combat. His eyes glimmered with the remnants of lost light, and an expression of pure anguish anchored him, as though he was teetering on the precipice of madness. "Why did you come?" he whispered, his voice a razor's edge, laced with despair and betrayal. "You shouldn't have come for me. There's nothing left but torment. This was my choice." I refused to believe that, I cried, every ounce of desperation bursting forth. "I won't abandon you. We can fight it together." His lips twisted into a cruel semblance of a smile, a sharp contrast against the pallor of his skin. "There's no fighting it, sister. This place reveals the true nature of our souls. You're here because you awakened it within yourself. You're as trapped as I am now." I recoiled, dread surging in my veins, but determination hardened within me. "No, you don't get to dictate this fate. I will save you." With a roar, he surged from the throne, a whirlwind of shadows ripping through the air, binding around me like tendrils seeking my very essence. "Then unveil your darkness, embrace it fully," he screamed, his voice a cacophony of agony and mockery. "Only then can you hope to wield the power to save me from what you've awakened." And in that moment, as the darkness surged, a terrible understanding slithered through my mind. It was a choice that would cascade through dimensions, one that would force me to confront the very fabric of who I was, who we had become. In that desperate choice, an unfathomable horror pressed down upon me, a specter rising from the very depths of my soul that I could feel it now, inching closer, begging me to surrender, to embrace the shadows that writhed within. Fear rippled through me, cold and unforgiving, as I gasped and took a step back. Just as I did, the ground beneath me shattered, a chilling rift gaping wide, pulling me toward the inky abyss below. I screamed, the sound swallowed by the darkness, and as the shadows tried to consume me, I clutched the shard tighter, a fleeting hope igniting amidst the encroaching despair. But then a voice broke through the tumult, resonating like thunder. "The hourglass has no mercy, and time runs thin. Your sacrifice is now demanded. Will you yield?" As terror clawed at my heart, I was engulfed in darkness, standing at the dire crossroads to embrace the chaos within and save my brother, or to let the darkness consume everything I held dear, plunging myself into an eternity of despair alongside the brother I had once adored. and then came the laugh, a hideous, bone-chilling laugh echoing through the chamber, as the shadows danced feverishly around me, forcing me to confront the horrifying truth. The choice had never truly been mine to begin with. The darkness crept in, swirling around me as I found myself among the writhing figures of my past lost souls caught in a loop between despair and longing. I could feel their eyes upon me, hungry and desperate, their whispers imbued with ages of suffering. Every corner of the chamber pulsated with regret, and I felt a chill tickle down my spine as my brother's barbed laughter danced in an eerie echo, wrapping around me like a sinister shawl. "Will you yield?" The voice echoed again, sharper this time, an embodiment of the oppressive pressure encasing my chest. My heart thrummed in sync with the shadows, a macabre song of confusion. Scrambling for clarity, I turned back to my brother, the one figure who had illuminated my darkest corners. "Listen to me," I cried, desperation threading through the frantic cadence of my voice. "You can fight this. We can break free together." But the shadows clung to him, their cool fingers weaving into his being like vines, twisting his essence into a grotesque amalgamation of my brother's former self. He gave me a look that penetrated the fog of madness and silence, a look mingled with sorrow and guilt. "You don't understand," he murmured, voice steeped in pain. "This darkness, it reflects what you truly are. You awoke it by coming here. It thrives on your fear, your loss, your regrets. We are bound, no." My instincts rebelled against his words. "You are not bound any longer. We are family, we can carve our own fate." But the shadows roared to life, spiraling ferociously, conjured by his anguish and my defiance. They coalesced into a writhing beast, a manifestation of everything I had denied about myself, picks and edges of despair framed by fury. It reached out to consume me, taunts echoing in every corner, fierce and frigid, while my brother remained tethered to his throne of torment. "Let it in," he urged softly, the twisted grin tugging at his lips. "Or watch everything you love slip away." His voice dripped with honeyed malice, slithering into my thoughts with vicious familiarity. In that split second, I felt the breath of the abyss, its icy fingers grazing my trembling skin. It promised absolution, power, and connection amidst the chaos, but it also whispered the terrible truth. I too was a shadow, entangled in the very darkness I sought to escape. This entity craved more than vengeance. It sought my true self, longing for the core of my being to unravel in the face of despair. "No!" I screamed again, grappling with the weight of my choices. In that moment of reckoning, revelations surged, memories of laughter and warmth against a backdrop of uncertainty and guilt. The joy cast shadows of heartache. Moments I wished to grasp, to hold close against the looming dread of loss, now stirred amidst the chaos surrounding me. And then the truth blew through like a gust of wind, sharp and sudden. I was not just fighting for him. I was fighting against the darkness within. The moment I thought I was rescuing my brother, I had awakened a part of myself that I feared to confront. "Embrace it." My brother's voice pierced like a blade, thick with desperation. "Only then can we truly be free." Suddenly, I realized it was not about yielding to the darkness. It was about acknowledging my fears and transforming them, subduing the primal instincts that yearned for despair and anguish. With each step toward the obsidian throne, shadows outstretched towards me, clawing like tenacious specters. You are fledgling shadows barely staving off oblivion. They hissed, their breath rancid and cold. I staggered under the weight of their insistence, grappling to forge clarity amid their clamorous desires. I closed my eyes, allowing memories to unfurl like a tapestry. Moments of jarring reality. My brother's laughter paled under the weight of his pain. The quiet moments of grief where I second-guessed every word said and left unsaid. Faces of those lost flickered around me, each face haunting with the love and regret I bore. "Please," I whispered, opening my eyes to meet the grotesque gaze of the specter that was once my brother. "I won't let you take me. I won't leave you behind." But as I drew closer, shadows pooled around, grasping, begging me to join. They were relentless, thrumming with hunger that pricked every remaining shred of resolve. The chamber stirred with anticipation as if awaiting my surrender, laughing, mocking each gasping breath. "Join us," shadows chanted, twisting, contorting, eyes blazing. "End the struggle. Embrace oblivion." Cold, clammy hands wrapped around my throat, squeezing with crushing restrictions. I gasped, desperation clawing like claws raking my chest. "No, I won't succumb to you." A primal roar surged, and with it, a part of me awakened. With each fiber of my being, I focused inward, pulling strands of light from within, igniting the silver shard with fervor, nurturing the hope-braided exterior. I screamed into the void, illuminating my essence with a blinding glow. "I accept you, but I won't be consumed by you. You will not defeat me." And in that moment of defiance, I witnessed transformation, a metaphysical shifting of shadows doused in radiant light. I felt power surging through me, igniting the very air. A defiant resolve rose breaking through despair's prison, forging a new path. With each word, each affirmation of my lost humanity, the shadows of torment peeled back, howling in fury. "No!" They screeched in disarray as a wave of light, untouched by darkness, surged from my core, shattering the confines surrounding us. My brother's distorted features flickered like a candle fighting against the dark. I drew closer, caught between terror and love. The glimmers of who he once was flickering faintly. Together, I whispered, reaching for him, urging our past to break through the shadow's embrace. A pulse snapped as the shadows recoiled, darkness loosening its grotesque grip. "Fool! You think you'll save him?" The voice screeched, reeling backward, and light surged forth, illuminating the dank chamber. "Feel the light, brother," I cried, pulling him forth through the tumult, the grotesque laughter still echoing, but subtly weakening. The shadows quivered, staving off luminescence as an echo of truth bit back. This was not merely about sacrifice. It was about unearthing the wellspring of hope forged in darkness and remembering love suffocated under despair. Through sheer will, I released my fear, witnessing the shadows dissipate like mist before dawn. The cacophony erupted in ripples of light. Souls freed rushed forward, howling joyfully as they danced to the embrace of deep warmth, finding solace where there once had been only suffering. My brother's features softened. A flicker of warmth returning to his eyes, a glimmer of the boy I adored washed over with brotherly light. "Sister," he whispered, voice trembling. And before he could utter another word, the very fabric of reality ripped apart, darkness curling beneath us like a constricting serpent. Screams erupted, a symphony of terror crashing like waves against the shore, echoing with promises of despair. But hope forged with love gently flickered, cradled in the warmth of remembrance. Hope, light, and love pushed back against my resolve like the tide reclaiming the shore. As if the abyss knew it was defeated, its screams morphed into layers of silence sinking into the depths. And as I swept my brother into the embrace of freedom, the chamber collapsed around us, glistening shards of truth and light illuminating the path ahead. The darkened corners faded, and warm hues painted our passage, the echoes of our reality drawing us toward the surface once more. But even in our victory, a voice, a chilling echo, soft yet malicious, whispered in the recesses of my mind. "We are never truly free." And in that moment, I understood the depth of the darkness. Even in liberation, its remnants would linger, always clawing at the edges, forever binding me to the choice I also carried within. The specter of despair would echo alongside love, melded into one eternal truth. The true horror would always persist, lurking in the shadows of the heart. Once freed, a lingering doubt settled deep. Would I even know peace? And with that thought, as we stepped into a blinding brightness, the haunting laughter flickered to life anew. "You chose poorly, dear sister. The shadows linger on,